I am beyond excited for this series. Let's get into it. Hello my creative peeps, and welcome back to my channel for another video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today is our first installment of my new series called I Try Your Wishlist Supplies, where every month I purchase a new supply, test it out, play with it, and give you my honest thoughts and review on it to see if it's something maybe you want to invest in or you're going to take it off your wish list. So every month I'm asking for your suggestions, and then my patrons vote on which supply we'll be choosing. So thank you so much to my patrons for helping me decide. I would never be able to pick myself, so plus that way I get to pick the one that you guys, the majority of you, want to see. So it was pretty close this month, but just by a hair, Acrylic Inks won out. So if you have a supply that you would like to suggest already for February, please leave it in the comments below, as my patrons will start voting on which one they want a week from the posting of this video. So very exciting. I'm not going to make you wait any longer. Let's just dive in. So this month's supply was acrylic inks, and I have used some acrylic inks before, but I don't have a very large collection, so I did go a little hog wild. I tried to pick like different colors from different brands and get some different things to try out. I ordered them individually from Blick Art Materials. I will leave everything linked below in case you would like to check them out for yourself. Please know that some of the links that I post in the description are affiliate links, which means I get a small, like, couple cent commission for referring you at no extra cost to you, and it does help support the channel and will definitely help support me making these videos, as I am spending my own money to purchase these supplies. So thank you so much for that. Okay, this looks like a lot, but I don't think it is. So let's just pull this out. At this point, I don't even remember exactly what I ordered. So here we go. So the three different brands that I went with to try were this abstract ink by Sennelier. These I have never tried before, but I was watching a video recently and someone recommended the black as their favorite. So I got a black, and then I got this, like, this needs to be shaken up a lot, I think, but I got this, like, light purpley color. This is called Light Violet. So I'm excited to give that a go. I tried to go with colors that I thought I would use or that I was curious about. And the next brand I purchased from was Liquitex. Liquitex is the brand that I have some of. I have a couple of their other muted colors, so I really wanted to get another muted color. So I also got the purple because I feel like purple is something really lacking in my collection, and it's a color that's slowly becoming my favorite. It looked a lot lighter online, so we'll have to see how these inks turn out when we actually swatch them. I got a fluorescent pink because I use my fluorescent pink paint marker all the time, so I thought that would be a fun one to try. Basically, I just went with all of the... I went with a bunch of colors that I usually use in my paint markers because I figured that would be a good way to test them out, right? To buy colors I'm actually going to use. I'm not someone who uses these in like a fine art sense. I'm not an artist. I use them as a journaler, as an art journaler and a creative journaler. So my color preferences are quite different than the traditional artist who would probably buy, you know, a red, yellow, and blue to mix with. Last from Liquitex, I got this fluorescent red, and the reason I got the fluorescent red was because it looked very corally on the website listing, and it's really hard to find nice coral shades and colors of things, so I'm really excited to see how this ends up looking. The final brand I decided to try were the Amsterdam acrylic inks. So of course, you know me, I had to get a turquoise blue. So I'm excited to try that out and see how that works. I also picked up this light rose color, which is like a baby pink. Again, something I don't really have a lot of in my collection of colors to begin with, like in paint and stuff. So I thought it would be fun to give that one a go. And then this one, I am not gonna lie, I'm 1000% stumped as to why I purchased this one. I think I was looking at it when I was looking for a coral color, and I don't really think, I can't think of many instances where I would use a fluorescent orange. So, hashtag all the regrets, I guess, but who knows, maybe it'll be fun. I have no idea what I was thinking, but we have that one to test out. So I'm going to go ahead and shake some of these up, get them mixed together, and then we'll do some swatches. All right, so I got my paintbrush, my rag, my water's over here kind of out of the shot. I've gathered all of the inks. I solved the fluorescent orange mystery. I actually checked my packing slip again, and I checked them all off to make sure that I got them, but I didn't look at this, and it looks like must have been a free gift or whatever, because the price was $0. So I didn't go crazy and order fluorescent orange. It must have been a free gift, which is really cool. So thank you, Dick Blick, for that. Not that they're watching this, I'm sure, but anyway, let's go ahead and swatch these puppies out. I've grabbed my journal for the year. This is my Moleskine. It's just like a large notebook, so the paper's not great. So I have pulled out a piece of watercolor paper, because I feel like it's only fair to test these inks on paper they're actually like meant to be used on. But of course I'm going to do a whole page testing them in my journal here, because that's where I'm going to be using them. So let's just get into it, shall we? I'm going to try my best to stay in frame the whole time, so please bear with me if I'm not very good at that. Normally I would put these out into a palette, but because I'm doing so many colors at once, I'm actually just going to do them out of the bottle here. So they all come with this little dropper. If you don't know what acrylic ink is, it is liquid ink that has an acrylic base. So usually once they are dry, they don't move with water, whereas like a watercolor ink would reactivate with like water if you use something that had water in it on top of it. It's acrylic ink because they have acrylic formula binders and things in them. This is definitely darker than I thought it was going to be. I do really like the watered down look. I suppose we could just go straight into it on my paper as well. I have a piece of wax paper behind it because I know that pretty much everything is going to bleed through this paper. It doesn't like a ton of water either, so there's that. So right off the bat, the difference between the three brands, I think you can kind of see it as I'm working with it. I don't know if that has to do with the colors, but in my experience, the Liquitex here, which I've used before, even though it's an acrylic ink, it very much acts more like an ink. It doesn't have that, like, painty look to it. It has more of like an ink, fountain pen ink, or watercolor look to it, rather than these other two brands, the Abstract. It could just be the Abstract with this, like, purple. We'll have to see how it tends to act with the black, but even washing it out in the water, you can see kind of like the white binder. So it looks and it acts more like a paint. I feel like this Amsterdam was kind of in the middle. It definitely acted more like a paint than the Liquitex did, but this Abstract was definitely most painterly. And again, this could just have to do with the color and how they mix them, because I did get more of this pastel color. All right, here we are. We're back. Everything is dry. I went ahead and just wrote the names and brands of the different inks and colors on here so that I wouldn't forget. First impressions. Initially, I thought I was going to like the Liquitex inks more. I think I was a little biased because there was the ones that I'd really worked with, although I did have the Daler Rowney. And I've come to the conclusion that my ink preference changes with the paper. So as you can see, you get better like texture and variations with the Liquitex inks, but on this paper specifically, because this is watercolor paper, whereas with the more paint-based acrylic inks, you get this like streaky, like it's paint, you know, it behaves less like ink and more like paint. And I thought I was going to really dislike that about the other brands. However, on my cheap, not great paper, I actually like the more paint-heavy options more because they sit on top of the page, whereas these ones, because of the nature of the paper and the water, the more ink-like ones create this gross effect, while the more paint-based ones in their thicker consistency kind of sit on the top better. Like you can see in this purple and here. We're not even going to talk about this like this orange. It's almost like, you know, when you get really cheap paint and it has like a goopy, separate-y texture. I don't know. It's just different. So those are my first impressions. All the brands I tried I thought were really great. Obviously, some are more paint-like and some are more ink-like I just talked about. And I think my preference for one or the other will depend on what paper I'm using. So, now that I've done my first impressions, I'm going to take a week or two and play with these inks in my different journals and sketchbooks. And after that, we'll talk about my experience with them. I'll show you what I did with them. And give you my final thoughts. All right, welcome back. It's been a couple weeks for me, for you it's only been a few seconds, but I thought we could talk about my experience with the inks, my thoughts on them, pros, cons, show you what I did with them, and all that fun stuff. So let's just get into it, shall we? All right, please excuse the stuff on my desk, tiny desk problems. So, thoughts on the acrylic ink. Overall, I liked it. I'll give you that spoiler alert right now. I had used it before, so that helped. In my collection, I had 2 Liquitex inks and a Daler Rowney ink, which I brought into the mix to test and swatch out for you guys. But after playing with the inks, I realized just how different the Liquitex brand is from the other brands that I tried. So the Liquitex acrylic inks is definitely more like an ink. And all the other brands I tried, which were the Amsterdam, the Abstract, Sennelier, and the Daler Rowney, they were very heavy on that acrylic binder that is in the ink. So that's the difference between acrylic inks and other inks, is that these inks are formulated with an acrylic binder, just like a acrylic paint would be. So you do get, because of the binder, when they dry, you get this like, it's like paint. I don't know how else to describe it. It gets like very opaque, super thick, and kind of plasticky feeling. Whereas with the Liquitex, the only time you get that plasticky bit is when you do like a huge drop. You saw me putting little drops on here. The Liquitex is also the only brand that didn't really streak. All the other brands, because of that acrylic binder, they leave like these paint streaks. I'll show you in my pages that I played with them in, kind of the difference between that. I have a pretty good example, but overall I like them. I'm definitely going to keep them and continue working with them. Going into the future, I personally prefer the Liquitex brand. However, in the specific journal that I'm using right now, because of the paper, the other brands worked better. Like the Amsterdam and Daler Rowney and Abstract Sennelier, because they weren't as inky and watery. So they sat on top of the paper while the Liquitex sunk in and created this like awful a granulated look. So I guess my preference lies with what paper I'm using it on. So that would be definitely something to take into account if you're looking into these yourself. So overall, the acrylic inks, in my experience, from what I tried here, not an expert, disclaimer, not an expert. But I found that while they are transparent and you can get more transparent with how much water you add to them, straight out of the bottle, they are more on the opaque side rather than transparent. They're fluid, which makes them super nice to use, and they glide smoothly on whatever you're using. The odor is pretty mild. I mean, if you stick your nose in the bottle, there's definitely a distinct odor, but I never noticed a smell while I was using them. I know that's important to some people, so I did want to mention that. Liquitex, like I mentioned, is more ink-like, and the other brands were more paint-like in my experience. Before we get into the pros and cons, let me show you what I did with them. So I used them in this journal a couple of different ways. One of the ways was just with like a paintbrush straight out of the bottle, so not diluted, and I used them for headers. So I wrote the January 01, not the black, but the under layer of it, as well as the engulf. And it worked really well because of the consistency and the thickness of the ink. It didn't run, which was really nice. I also did Longmire and a couple of these like doodle and accents with it. Here I did this page just like a stripe. So this is the fluorescent pink by Liquitex, and this is the yellow ochre by Daler Rowney. And this is where you can really tell the difference, like I said, between the two brands in terms of one being more ink-like and one being more paint-like. In the Daler Rowney, you can see the brush strokes pretty clearly, especially where it's thicker. You can also see the air bubbles that are trapped in there. They dried like that, which can be a cool effect if you're going for that. I am definitely not one who's against paint stripes, but I also really enjoy just like the flat ink look of the Liquitex ink. So I thought that was a good way to show you the difference between kind of the two. They are easy to write over, so I wrote over that here, and that's my plan with this page eventually, is to write over that. On this page, I wanted to test for you guys how it went over like a magazine, like a glossy. And this one I used the Sennelier Abstract in the purple. And it is a little like tacky, like acrylic paint is. I will say that. The first coat that I did was very streaky because the glossy magazine paper acts like a resist. So I did have to do a second coat, which may be why it's kind of sticky. I laid it on pretty thick there. I also did these little circles, and again, you can see the air bubbles, which, again, kind of cool, kind of not cool, I guess, if you wanted them there. So I used them that way. I also tested, this was a Liquitex one that I tested in my overflow journal. I wanted to see how it looked with over something, just with the, like, to measure the opacity and stuff. This is a pretty dark color, but overall, it covered it a lot. You can barely see what's underneath, but you still can kind of see it. It's kind of in that middle between translucent and opaque. You can still see the stuff underneath, but it's not like in your face. It definitely pushes it way back into the background, which I really like for this particular altered book project. So I definitely will be using them more in here. I thought that was pretty cool. So I used it in there. And then the last place that I used them was in here, and I wanted to test them on, this is a piece of Stalgy paper, so similar to Tomoe River paper in the way that it acts. And I wanted to do the wet on wet technique. So what that is you put water down and then you drop the ink into it, either with a brush or the dropper. The Liquitex acrylic inks definitely worked better for that, especially with all this like feathering and stuff, as you can see, kind of like a watercolor would. This was the Amsterdam. It did work, it did feather some, but again, where that large glob of it, where more of the product is, it creates that like acrylic glossy finish to it. And it definitely, again, looks more like paint than ink. I'm not trying to say that one is necessarily better than the other. While I do definitely have a preference between the different brands, depending on the case use that I'm doing, I'm not knocking one or the other. I'm just trying to share with you the differences. Now that you've seen that, let's go into the pros. Pros. They have a smooth and flowy experience. They're a dream to work with. You don't have that like goopy consistency like you do with acrylic paint, which is really nice. They're also not too runny. Like I said, I used them back here for the titles and stuff with a brush and nothing else. So that was really nice to be able to use them that way. If you wanted to draw with them, I think they might be a nice one to kind of do that. I don't think you should put it in a pen or anything, but because it would probably ruin it. But if you're just going to use a brush and stuff, they're cool like that. You can write over them for the most part, which we'll get to in the cons. They layer over most mediums and themselves. As long as you're not layering it over something super glossy, again, like I did with the magazine scrap, they'll kind of go over most things. You just have to kind of put a second coat on those things that are glossy because it'll like resist it a little bit. They come in tons of fun colors. Obviously, I have some pretty crazy ones here, so you can get them in some pretty cool colors. They're versatile because they act as paint and ink, so you can use them kind of in both case situations where you wouldn't really use a paint as an ink or an ink as a paint. You can kind of use it in both fields. They do have limitations, of course, but it does give you a little bit of like best of both worlds with that, which is cool. And they don't move once they're dry. So part of the advantage of having that acrylic binder is the fact that once it's dry, unlike watercolor, it doesn't move. You can put other wet media on top of it if you want, and it'll stay exactly where it is. You won't ruin your pens, yada yada. What are some potential cons? This is all subjective. Some of these things may make it a pro for you, but in my opinion, these are the potential cons. They can be pretty pricey in terms of comparing it to the price of, like, say, a bottle of paint. They can be more up there. Some sites are more affordable than others. I thought the price that I got on Blick's art website was pretty fair compared to, say, like Amazon can be a little more pricey because you're paying for like shipping and stuff. Like they add the shipping onto the price, if that makes any sense. I'll leave the links below for all of the ones that I used here today if I can find them on Blick, because that's the place that I would get them from, especially since you can order them a la carte. So along with the pricey topic, I would definitely say if you're going to invest in some of these for yourself, unless you're a fine artist, which you probably aren't if you made it this far in the video, because this was more of a journaler perspective, but I wouldn't get one of those like sets you can usually find at most art stores, because unless you like primary colors, you're only going to have like the red, blue, and yellow, and at least for me, that can usually ruin my experience with a product if I don't have colors that I like, because I'm just not going to use them, right? So I'd pick one or two of your favorite colors to try in whatever brand, or maybe a couple different brands like I did. That way you know that it's a color you're going to use if you do end up liking it, you know? Like I said, they can be pricey in comparison to some paints and stuff, but overall I think the price it's kind of middle of the road. It's definitely not a budget supply, but it's affordable enough you could pick up a couple of colors and not break the bank, you know? Another con, they have that plastic glossy finish to them for the most part, because of the acrylic binder. Again, it's not really like anything they can fix, it's just the nature of it. For me, I really like acrylic paint, but I prefer matte pretty much all the way. I don't really like the super streaky, plasticky look. So using these in like super thick applications on a not so absorbent surface really isn't the most ideal in my opinion. They separate. So one thing that does drive me a little batty is they do separate. The Liquitex does not separate, but all of the other brands seem to. I don't know how well you can see it on camera, but like the darker purples here, the lighter purples here, and then the white is on the bottom. So every time you use them, even if it's only been a couple of hours, you have to like reshake them, which is why you can get those weird air bubble things sometimes. So again, like I said, they can be streaky. The Liquitex brand doesn't work as well on the thinner paper, which can be a con, especially for me in this journal, which I was not expecting. Water-based marker does not dry well on it, if at all. Hopefully you can see here, I tried to write on it with a gel pen, a water-based marker, and a ballpoint pen. The ballpoint pen stays just fine as long as you don't like swipe your finger over it right away. The marker, even after leaving it for a little bit, you can see it on my finger still, even after leaving it for a little bit, it doesn't dry really. It just kind of stays on the top, again, because of this more acrylic finish. So basically, if you could use it over acrylic paint, you could probably use it over these inks. But just something to keep in mind. Gel pen is definitely hit or miss depending on the gel pen, but leans more toward the not going to dry side. And then colored pencil doesn't work on it in the thick areas. So I didn't have a problem with the colored pencil on top of the, again, Liquitex ink. But with the other brands, it definitely doesn't show up as well where the paint is thicker. I think that's about all I had to say for that. So yeah, overall, I enjoy acrylic inks. They're not like my top of the line favorite of all time supplies, but they're definitely up there and I will continue to use them, especially in this journal. I think they're going to work well with the not so thick paper, especially the more paint heavy. Liquitex brand is still still my favorite for papers that are more equipped to handle it. And yeah, I hope that you guys found this video interesting and helpful if acrylic inks was something that you might have been considering getting. And I hope me sharing my thoughts on kind of both sides and the pros and the cons helped you decide whether it would be a good fit for you to try for your experimentation and journaling. Let me know in the comments below if you have already tried these and what you thought of them. I would love to get your opinion on that. Also, drop in the comments below your suggestion for my next installment of the I Try Your Wishlist Supply series. My patrons will be voting again on which one we will be doing for February, so stay tuned for that. I'll have to get that pull up for them a week from the posting of this video. So if you have a suggestion, definitely put it down in the comments below. Even if you've suggested it for a previous video, go ahead and put it on there again. I don't mind recirculating requests. So with all that being said, thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you're enjoying this series. I am already thrilled with it and I can't wait to see what you guys pick for February. Thank you guys so much for being here and watching today. A huge thank you to my patrons for sponsoring today's video. They help make what I do over here possible. Don't forget, if you want to check out any of these inks, I will leave them all linked below. The link below is an affiliate link, just so you know, so I do get a small commission at no extra cost to you just for referring you to the supply, and it does help the channel, especially since I'm purchasing these with my own money. So thank you in advance for that if you do that. Otherwise, just thank you for watching. That's always a huge help. Really appreciate it. Give me a thumbs up, all that fun stuff. Take care, you guys. I will see you guys next week for another video. Bye!